Good evening, Moore, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be venturing into the depths of the woods because there are cabins here waiting for our arrival. I hope you're ready because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. While hiking in the Carpathian Mountains, I spoke with a local mountain ranger who recounted a troubling incident. A lone hiker, spotted by the ranger, was wearing sneakers and had no gloves despite the winter conditions. The ranger warned him that he was ill-equipped and suggested he turn back, but the hiker ignored the advice. When night fell and the hiker had not returned, a rescue mission was launched. The man was fortunate to be found alive, lying in a snow pit, bleeding with stains all around him. It turned out he had read that cutting your hands would keep you warm and prevent frostbite. It's as if he got his survival tips from the same sources that anti-vaxxers get their medical advice. In the early 80s, I worked as a geologist with the National Park Service at Yellowstone. It was a summer gig, and my first task when guiding groups around the mud pot geysers or any thermal areas was to give a stern warning: stay on the boardwalk, don't throw trash or coins into the thermal features, don't put your hands or feet in, and stay behind any barricades. I emphasized taking only pictures and leaving only footprints on the boardwalk. Despite not having any official power beyond an average blue passport holder, my large stature, Ike beard, and passion for geology and preservation usually ensured compliance. Most groups, although they grumbled, followed the rules. That changed one blistering July afternoon with a French tour group. Although I didn't speak French, one of the tourists volunteered to translate. I gave my usual warnings, which were loudly translated for everyone. As we began the tour, everything seemed fine until halfway through when some stragglers fell behind. While waiting, I noticed someone stepping off the boardwalk near the Glory Pool. I asked the translator to shout for them to return, which he did, causing a few others to join in the effort. Eventually, they all returned to the boardwalk. But then, another tourist pointed out someone else from the group stalking a deer in the opposite direction, away from the thermal feature. Thinking he was safe, he ventured off to photograph the deer. Unfortunately, he broke through the crust into superheated geothermal water and mud, known as nature's napalm. I immediately called for rescue services and told the group to stay put or face arrest. I cautiously approached the trapped man, belly crawling and swearing, hoping my training would pay off. After a tense struggle, I managed to drag him out. He survived but suffered massive third-degree burns, faced a hefty fine, and was banned from U.S. national parks for life. Once, I escorted a church group, ranging from young kids to adults, on a weekend overnight outing to a camp in the Poconos. The camp, located at the confluence of two streams, offered a rugged environment and a variety of activities, including a climbing wall, boating, hiking, sports, a nature center, and a small museum. The nature center featured interactive displays, fish tanks, small animals, and a touch table, a large wooden table with sides covered in artifacts that guests could pick up and handle. These items included deer antlers, bones, turtle shells, feathers, arrowheads, pottery, rocks, seeds, nuts, and tanned hides. The kids especially loved it. All the items were found by guests or staff while exploring the camp and brought back to the nature center. As an environmental scientist by profession and an outdoorsman and naturalist for fun, I often handled these items. One day, I noticed a bone with a really odd shape. Upon closer inspection, I recognized it as a human mandible, the lower jawbone of a person. It was severely worn smooth and had no teeth, but it was unmistakably human. The bone had been there for years, handled by thousands of people, and no one had noticed or reported it. I informed the camp director, who removed it and notified the state police. They investigated and determined that it was very old. No one had been reported missing in the immediate area, so the camp wasn't allowed to keep it. A possible explanation was that the facility had been a timbering and ice harvesting camp until the 1920s, and the bone might have been the remains of a worker who perished and was buried there. However, the real story remains unknown. As far as I know, it's still a mystery. I live in a small hick town, which I'll leave unnamed for the sake of anonymity. You could call me a park ranger, but in a town of 2,500 people, there isn't much to do. The park I patrolled was bigger than the downtown itself. One day, during my routine patrol, nothing out of the ordinary happened. It was mostly quiet until I hit the trails and saw my coworker, which was strange because we stood on opposite sides of the park and meet in the middle. I called his name, but he didn't answer. Thinking he hadn't heard me, I got closer, repeatedly calling his name, still receiving no response. When I reached him, I gave him a playful punch on the shoulder, but he just sat there, silent. I positioned myself to see his face and found him staring at a tree right in front of him. Naturally, I grabbed my flashlight and started to look around the tree. Once I was around the tree, I saw a decent-sized hole in the ground. Shining my flashlight into the hole, I began to understand why my coworker was acting so strange. Inside the hole were a bear and two young Mexican boys who had passed away. I quit later that week, as any sane person would. I never heard from my coworker again, and word around town said the boys weren't from the area. The newspaper reported that the cause of their deaths was unknown, and the bear had simply wandered upon them. I personally believe that someone had done something horrific. The hole was freshly dug, and their bodies were fresh. I still have vivid nightmares about my coworker's eyes and the lifeless bodies of those two little boys. Here's a little backstory on how I learned that nature doesn't mess around. I'm a resident of Arkansas, known as the Natural State, and I do a side job called trail running. This involves working with a tour guide to scout out nature locations a few days in advance, checking for any obstacles like floods, creeks, or fallen trees. One of our frequent tasks is to document paths to waterfalls, as Arkansas has around 300 of them, many without trails leading to them. This isn't a foolproof strategy, and sometimes I get off course by miles. I prefer traveling alone because I enjoy the isolation, though sometimes a friend tags along for extra money. We never know what to expect, so we're heavily armed against wildlife and the elements. Our gear includes knee pads, high steel wading boots, 2 machetes, and flare guns. Now for the story. I had a job to find another way to a waterfall called Cobboss Hollow, as the main trail was flooded. Waterfall season in Arkansas is from October to August, and it rains a lot. I found a back road leading to the marked forest area, but the road was no longer passable due to a mudslide that had wiped it out long ago. The road snaked down into a canyon, and I had to disembark my vehicle and hike down. After 2 hours of hiking, I came across a flooded creek, usually a good sign that a waterfall is nearby. I hiked downstream for about 3 miles and found an old Subaru SUV. The vehicle had clearly been there a long time, with scratch marks on the rusted exterior and an Ontario, Canada license plate, suggesting the owner wasn't familiar with Arkansas wilderness. The right back window was smashed, with glass and bits of cloth inside the car. The left back window was cracked and bent outward, as if something had pushed against it. The car's interior was degraded and covered in black spots. Nearby, There was an untouched campsite with old cans and a campfire arrangement, indicating it had been abandoned for years. I figured this probably happened before I was born, as I was 18 at the time. I quickly left the area and concluded with my trail guide that a mountain lion had likely attacked the person in their sleep. We marked the zone as dangerous due to wildlife, and I've never taken a job in that area since. Back in the day, I was a wildland firefighter in Arizona, working in a forest that was popular for recreation in the northern part. However, I was stationed in the remote southern portion of the forest, which had few roads or campgrounds. To enjoy this area, you had to work for it. My fire crew had 2 duty stations, one in a small town where most of the forest employees worked, and another about 2.5 hours away along a windy mountainous road. The remote duty station had an old Forest Service ranger station and a newer double-wide trailer. When I worked there, we had no cell reception, so when we weren't working, my crew would play horseshoes or watch movies. They eventually installed a cell phone booster, which sadly just made people spend more time on their phones. My supervisor from that crew had some weird experiences there. One night, he was cowboy camping, sleeping outside without a tent, and kept feeling a strange, mucousy drop of liquid land on his face. He looked around and even yelled, but no one was around. He wasn't below any trees, so it wasn't tree sap. He never slept outside there again, which made me believe he was telling the truth. I had my own unsettling experience at that remote station. On the night of the 4th of July, we weren't on a fire, so the crew was playing horseshoes and having a good time. We went to bed early because we had a hike planned for the next day. I had my own small room in the double-wide trailer, and my bed was situated next to a big window. As I started dozing off, I heard my coworkers standing outside my window, asking me to come outside. I was lying on my side, facing the window, and didn't look up, but I felt their presence. It seemed like something tall was looming over me from the outside. They kept beckoning me, and when I said no, their voices changed to a deeper, raspier, and angrier tone. They started cursing at me to get out. I froze, paralyzed with fear, as they yelled at me with a demonic voice. Eventually, it stopped, and I fell asleep. The next day, I wanted to ask my coworker if he had been standing outside my window, but I felt too weird about it. Perhaps it was a mild form of sleep paralysis, but it was still a bizarre and frightening experience. I used to do wilderness forestry in the Linville Gorge area of North Carolina. A jack-o'-lantern is a disembodied light that floats in the air, commonly reported in the southern Appalachians. These reports are often disregarded as people might mistake them for something more mundane. I've seen a few things that I suspected were jack-o'-lanterns, but there was one instance that was unmistakable, a free-floating light out in the open on the east side of Shorthoff Mountain. This area has no trails and can only be accessed by someone with excellent mountaineering skills and woodcraft. Moreover, the light was floating above brush too thick for anything to move quickly and smoothly through if it was on the ground. I should point out there is a confirmed similar phenomenon nearby, the Brown Mountain Lights, which have puzzled people for centuries. On hot summer nights, you can sit at Wiseman's View or pull off on the highway east of the gorge and see jack-o'-lanterns dance along Brown Mountain Ridge for yourself. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed tonight's spine-chilling camping tales. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you more heart-pounding horror stories soon. Stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep the campfire burning. Like and share this video and don't forget to subscribe the channel.